David, are you set and ready to go? I know you're jumping right in.
I think we're all good to go here. Hey, sorry about the delay. We had a couple of technical glitches here, but thanks everybody for joining us. Boy, what fabulous fall weather we're having, right? Wake up, it's in the 40s, got that crisp feel in the air and everything. So the fall season is definitely on us. So with that in mind, what I thought we'd do is things are kind of slow at the plant clinic. We don't have a lot of insect and disease stuff going on right now, but that's good because it's going to give us an opportunity to talk about fall planting, things we can be planting in our gardens now to enjoy for flowers, for foliage, looking ahead even to the next season. So just a whole list of little things like that going on. So kind of an eclectic mix of topics and pictures I put in here. But we're just going to go ahead and get jumping there and get started. Please, we like this to be as interactive as possible. So wherever you have comments, ideas, if you want to share what's going on in your garden, any of that stuff, please send your messages to Sally, and we would love to hear from you. Just one quick second here.
Go ahead and click share.
I have, but I need to get into this one little second here. And I get into my show. Sorry, we usually have all this stuff set up ahead of time, but
It's all right. We're on a condensed timeline today, unexpectedly.
all right. So we're all good to go, right? So yeah, this we're getting looking a little ahead, like I said, because there we are, that fall picture. That's kind of what we are looking forward to. So to kind of kick off our conversation about this, I always like to kind of reassess where we are as far as the seasons go and the change of seasons. And what we do is this is obviously taking the big view of what's going on. But if we could step far enough back, what we would see is essentially as we're making our turn around the sun here, really starting from the summer solstice in June, which was our longest day of the year. The days gradually getting shorter, shorter, shorter. We hit that equinox in September where we're roughly half and half, half light, half dark, and then we're kind of making our way around here, approaching eventually winter, which is again going to be the longest or shortest day of the year, the longest night that's there. So you see all this happening around you. As you get up in the morning, you see it's dark, the days are getting shorter. It continues like this. But I want to talk a little bit about both how our plants react to this, less so about how we react to it and everything, but really as these seasons change, we look at this, respond to it, the plants do as well. So if we look at this as we go through these shorter day lengths and everything, if you're a plant, you're a stationary sedentary organism and you basically put down your roots and you're growing. I'm trying to think, we all have these circadian rhythms that we follow and everything as we respond and react to what's going on in the environment around us. So with plants, as amazing as they are, they'll have these photoreceptors, these phytochromes that actually respond to changing amounts of the environment around them, and in particular, talking about the amount of sun that they're getting. So when you look at all the different pigments that occur in plants, there are these phytochromes, and some of them are responsive to light, and then that will in turn dictate or set a clock for the plant. So plants, as the amount of daylight changes, that's what they use to set their internal clocks or circadian rhythms within that. And what my little diagram here is showing, particularly, is there's a key phytochrome in there that's called, well, they just call them phytochrome red, which is the PR or phytochrome far red. And so they will convert. So in the presence of sunlight, this phytochrome red reacts. It becomes what we call an active state during the daylight. And then as night comes and under less light, it returns back to its inactive condition. So it's an internal clock that then signals to the plant different growth characteristics. And based on the balance of the red and far red in there, this can affect seed germination, can affect even how plants react to shade when they're sensing their neighbors around them, or in a sense, to reduce shade. It will reduce how that plant allocates resources. And what we're really talking about here is it also greatly influences flowering within the plants. So we see this happening right in front of us. And this is one of the things that I think is fun. And you might wonder why, how all this pertains to gardening. It's because I feel like as gardeners, we live this. We're out there, we're in our garden, and we see the plants and how the environment is responding to the changes in the environment. And it's such a wonderful experience of now we spend so much time on screens and in controlled environments. It really keeps us in touch and in contact with nature. So particularly, I'm talking about what we see happening, what are referred to, hopefully I'm going to close this thing, what are referred to as short day, long night flowers. So it's the change of day length, or really more specifically, it's the longer night periods, the change of dark period that will trigger a flowering response in some plants. So these phytochromes sense that the nights are getting longer, the days are shorter. They basically send a signal over, and what most scientists think now is that there's actually a flowering gene, and then that triggers the production of a specific gene that induces flowering in the plants. So that's all going on inside the plant, and none of us really need to know that, but it's cool that's what's happening. And so certain plants like celosia will come into bloom. And so just like I have right here over my shoulder, celosia variety called Intense, this is an annual flower. The freezing temperature is going to kill it, but really the flowers come out and look really pronounced and bring us some really cool colors at this time of the season. Uh, we look at goldenrod, a wonderful native plant, one of the keystone plants that we have as far as keeping a healthy food chain in our garden and providing food and pollen for insects. Somehow this kind of got ways disconnected or incorrectly identified sometimes with allergies and hay fever. This is not a wind pollinated plant. Goldenrod is an insect pollinated plant, and all these little clusters of long lasting blooms attract all kinds of pollinators and beneficial insects to it. So it has nothing to do with hay fever or allergies. It's just a wonderful native plant to have for late summer color in the garden. So asters, again, they really step into the center stage right now and are showing you their absolute best. And again, they are also just like the goldenrod. These are in the same family. They have these composite flowers. So as bees and insects are storing away food, prior to the winter coming and everything, and valuable resources for the pollinators and insects in our garden. And also for us, just absolutely beautiful. Chrysanthemums, uh, huge, huge horticultural crop. I brought this ginormous one in. Check this guy out on my shoulder. He was so big, I couldn't fit him in the doorway, or had to very carefully get in the doorway. But I just like if you walked into the garden center right now, this is what you find: just chocker block full of chrysanthemums, every shape, size, and color that's out there. Now, the ones that we're looking at this picture, the ones I have behind me here, these often we just refer to them as pot mums. They've been developed for prolific flowers, for diverse collection of flower forms, of prolific blooms. So they're really developed as a floriculture crop. And with that in mind, they may not be as reliably cold hardy as others. So we sell them as annual, saying, hey, you put them in your garden if you want, well, you enjoy them as seasonal color. If you want to put them in the garden, they may or may not survive for you because they were not developed for the cold hardiness. And depending on the weather and the conditions, you may be successful or you may not. These chrysanthemums, this is a variety, it's called Sheffield's Pink, is a cold hardy chrysanthemum. And we sell these in our perennial department. And these chrysanthemums are rock solid, sturdy, extremely cold hardy, very reliable, very durable. In fact, to me, they almost can become too aggressive. So I'm at a point now where each year I go in and thin this out and sort of to keep it contained so it doesn't go too far beyond the boundaries that are in there. So we have all different colors of these, but it happens a lot of times in these hardy perennial chrysanthemums, you may not have the elaborate flower forms. They may not be as prolific, but this is the kind of display that they can give you. And they're just beginning to come into flower. They're kind of in their bud stage right now. You can see the fall colors behind you. So this is what we would be looking at probably within a couple of weeks. So they're fantastic plants to really add that fall display of color in our gardens. And they are tough, sturdy, durable plants. So we see all these cycles playing out in our gardens, but it's also not just as simple as looking at, measuring the daylight and everything. Plants also have this really incredible ability where they will also sort of monitor the temperatures and respond to the temperature changes as well. So again, they are in connection with their world. They're responding, they're reacting, they're growing, their cycles are all in connection with nature. So where examples we see this is incredibly important in fruit production. Many of our fruit trees, apples, pears, cherries, they all have what we call a chilling requirement. They require a period of cold temperature before they'll be able to initiate flowering. So for example, again, these fruit trees, they already have their flower buds. The short days of fall going into winter have basically the plant has already produced its flower bud, but that bud will not open until it has a certain chilling period. It requires a period of cold before it will allow the plant to bloom. So this is why some of these plants do so much better in a northern climate. This would be an example why tulips, for example, tulips really, we can't grow them down south because they don't have enough cold weather. And actually, as they go further north in cooler weather, they actually perform better. So again, they are reacting and responding to these environmental cues that are in there. Uh, Orchids, I put that in there. So orchids are a good example of vernalization. They actually do also require a chilling period before they will initiate flowering. That's why these plants you'll see are, we have them year round because we can induce them into flowering, but we have our best selection of these orchids in the winter. Now, these are tropical plants. You're not leaving outside. They need to go indoors. But one of the easiest ways to get these to bloom sometimes is to put it outdoors in a sheltered protection area until we start to get to some cold temperatures, as in like now, I think it's 44 degrees. And this morning at my place, and I saw 39 degrees in the extended forecast. So we really don't want them ever to go below 40 degrees. And usually by the time we're in the 50s, I want to bring them inside. But that cool temperature and then bringing them back into the warmth, we usually get them to initiate flowering right away. So this is, I'd like to talk a little bit about the science behind gardening. You guys know that's why I like to do, hey, it's my plant clinic talk. I get to talk about the stuff that I'm interested in. So as I was looking at this, it's just really neat. I say how much the day lengths affect all of us. Some of us, hey, the days get shorter. In the absence of sunlight, we start getting gloomy. We have these same circadian rhythms. The plants have it too, but it's nothing to get bummed about. It's just a change of seasons, just a change is taking place, and we can see beauty and enjoyment in there. And it's why I keep saying, like, now we have to plant our bulbs now. So, like we talked about fertilization, if you look at a bulb, right, you've got an entire plant in here. You got leaves, stems, flowers, the roots here, and the basal plate. Everything's here packed and ready to go. But the way you're going to get it to bloom is it needs to go down in the ground. We can do that anytime. For a daffodil, it's going to need probably at least 6 to 8 weeks down in that cool, moist, chilling environment, getting its roots established. And after that chilling requirement has been met, then it can initiate the flowering or remove that inhibition and allow it to flower. So don't miss this opportunity. Get out there, get your bulbs planted. Pansies, again, a cool season annual. Pansies are winter hardy for us. They'll live through the winter. They'll do bloom for you all the way through until about June. And that's the hot temperatures that cause them to kind of fizzle out on us. So this is why I say it's that time of tough love in the garden. If you have not already done this, recognize that one season's coming to a close. And like even here, this is Melanompodium. It's a summer annual. It is not cold hardy. So you just got to get tough, pull this out, put things in that will give us color through the winter and spring, and just kind of go with the cycles that are there. And it is all happening right now. Also, it's a great harvest season, as we go from October into November. So we've got pumpkins, gourds, all this stuff that we want to enjoy. Uh, we also have flower color. Uh, we always think of spring as the bloom season, but just like we're featuring plants that flower late in the season, of camellias. The Sasanqua camellias in my book are just really hard to beat. We have Camellia japonica that flowers for us in the late winter, early spring, and they are beautiful plants. But so often they start to bloom or they start to open up, and we get a cold night, a freeze, a frost, and that sort of then cuts their bloom season short. So to me, the Sasanqua varieties, the ones that are beginning to bloom kind of towards October, hit their peak bloom as we go into November, and some will continue into December, depending on our weather conditions. I love these because one, I don't have those problems with late frost. It brings me flowers at a time of year when everything else is kind of fading out. And so it just adds this whole nother dimension that's in there. And there are just so many of them. I put in here, Kenjiro, just this iridescent pink color. And got a little honeybee in there just taking a pollen bath in there, going after the nectaries that are in there. Because again, they will be out and they'll be out actively flying whenever our temperatures are above 50. And so it's nice to have a food source that's available for them. So, again, just showing sort of variety of colors. There are also double flowered forms. I just tend to really like the simple blooms and the really bright pink stamens showing up in there. Now, Winter Star is a nice example of a hybrid. At the National Arboretum many, many years ago, during an extremely cold winter, the camellia collections essentially killed off. But the plant breeders out there, rather than being totally depressed about that, saw an opportunity because one camellia lived. And they thought, that's the one, that's the winner. They were able to take that one because they recognized the cold hardiness of that plant. And then with hybridization with other like the tea camellia, where we get the tea leaves from, undertook an extensive hybridization program and brought us this whole new series of camellias, like Snow Flurry that you see here. This is kind of that peony type bloom with the double petals and the white. One of the things I like to point out is look on the ground. All these petals just to the ground, just dropping like snow. The way these flower is the individual bloom does not last a long time. But it's such a prolific bloomer. So the plant may open, and let's pretend you have 100 blossoms open, and those 100 blossoms last for a day, two, maybe three, and then those petals drop to the ground. But then 100 more blossoms open. Same thing plays out, and then 100 more. And it's such a prolific bloomer that you can get actually a very long bloom season that comes out of these. Again, it will often start in October. November's kind of my peak bloom season, and I've had it continue all the way into December. So again, if you're looking for a broadleaf evergreen, partial shade, camellias are really amazing for that. I have actually better luck with them than I do rhododendrons and mountain laurels, and I often offer those up as an alternative where we're having trouble with some of the others. Some of the breeding efforts also within azaleas, you've seen like Encore azaleas, Bloomathon azaleas. These are azaleas that have more than one bloom season. And so if our traditional azaleas flower for us, say in April is a peak season for azaleas, they're now a whole series and a whole bunch of different colors and out there that will flower for you in May, but then they will also bloom for us in October. So what happens is where naturally these plants, they would form their flower buds in late August, again, go through that kind of vernalization process and then open in spring. These respond a little bit differently, and so they still produce their flower buds in August, but you'll have, let's pretend, again, just saying this, but so the ones in October there, maybe I have 100 blossoms open, and then the other 400 blossoms open for us in May. So we kind of get that extended bloom season out of them. So that's also a fun thing that you can play around with in your garden. So right now, there's an excellent time to be planting. Like I said, we can plant everything, bulbs, annuals, perennials, grass seed, trees, shrubs. But as I have to remind you all the time, each and every time, is you are responsible for watering when you get a new plant. Most of our winter damage, which is sometimes referred to as winter burn, really is not because of the cold temperatures. It's occurring because of desiccation, because it's drying out. And particular evergreens, broadleaf evergreens especially, hollies, laurels, camellias, yews, magnolias. They have this big exposed flat leaf surface out there. They are transpiring. They're taking water up from the roots and losing it through their leaves that's just their natural way of growing. And because they are evergreen, they do this 12 months out of the year. We expect rain, sleet, snow. We expect in our area to have plenty of moisture in the winter, but occasionally we hit these dry spells. So if it's been 3 or 4 weeks and we've not been getting any moisture from Mother Nature, then we actually need to go out there and water our evergreens. And I'm saying this specific to new plants because if I have a 10-year-old plant, it's got root systems going way out to here and it can better sustain and nourish itself. I have a new plant, little root system here, it doesn't have the reserves, and we just have to be conscientious and pay attention to watering. So I want you to go out and plant, but just kind of be aware of that. Of Also, as the days get shorter and there's less light and the plants start responding, we're talking about some of their flowering characteristics and seed and fruit production and so on. But also, a lot of the pigments in the leaves start to deteriorate, start to decline, and you start to see seasonal color in the foliage of the plant. So evergreens shed their leaves. So the plant like this is a white pine, and what's doing is it's shedding its old needles in October, and then it will grow new needles as we go into about May. So they go through a similar cycle, but what happens is they might produce new needles. The individual needles or bundles, what we call fascicles, might live for about 3 years. So in here, I see the old ones fading off of there. The green ones out the tip will live through the winter time, and then new growth will emerge from them next spring. So they remain green, but when you start to see Chamaecyparis, the Hinoki cypress, just other cypress, pines. When you start to see this kind of dramatic yellowing on the interior branchlets of the tree, this is a normal seasonal shedding. If it progresses and then I start seeing dieback occurring out the tips, we got a problem and we need to see you at the plant clinic and figure out what that is. Of course, our deciduous trees, we live in this beautifully diverse area and just an enormous collection of trees and shrubs and flowers. But just putting out a couple of my favorites, which is hard to limit myself. But really, the black gum, Nyssa sylvatica, what a phenomenal tree to have in our landscape. Uh, so you see the fall color. They're one of the first trees to color up in fall, and you can just get these scarlet red colors that go out. So they're the first ones that really tell us that fall is on the way. And even while the rest of the forest might still be green, you'll see these big pops of red coming out there. This was, if you went back 20, 30 years ago, you couldn't even buy a black gum. You'd come into the nursery and we would not even have them available. But in large part because of the increased interest in native trees, and now they're made their way into nursery production, and we even have named varieties. There's specific cultivars you can get where the new growth comes out kind of a burgundy color, the red fall coloration is consistent. They are well adapted to our heavy clay soils, often growing in these kind of wet conditions. Very, very easy, almost completely carefree, pest-free tree. Only little issue I have with it, or it's not a little issue, it's a significant issue. The only issue I have with it is they will get big. We're talking about a tree that eventually is going to 100 feet. Maybe in our lifetime, we don't see it quite that size, but you're going, 50, 100 feet tall. So you need to have some space for that. But if you have the space, what a gorgeous tree, nice form in the summer, very easy care, pest tree, native tree. Ginkgo, we have everybody gravitates to liking the bright reds and oranges in our landscapes, and for good reason. But sometimes feel like we might be missing a little bit of the bright yellows out there. So things like the ginkgo or our native hickory can really add to the fall color that's out there. And this again, this picture is taken down the Atlanta Botanic Gardens, but it really kind of shows this. So the ginkgo has this habit of where it will color up almost all at once simultaneously and then shed its leaves and let go of them all at once. I've never had the privilege of being in the right place at the right time, but I understand from what I've read that if you're in the right place at the right time, you literally can stand there and watch these leaves cascade, drop down. In Japan, they'll hold events around it. At Blandy Farm, where they have a big collection in our state arboretum, big collection of ginkgos, they actually have a ginkgo watch out there, so you can kind of check on their website and see where they're progressing, and maybe you'll have a chance to get there at the right time and see all this happen. But a very sturdy, durable tree. The bright yellow coloration is nice. But this is a big tree. You got to have room for it to grow. Uh, Chinese pistache. This I'm going to tell you, it's a tree I'm not all that familiar with. I'm still sort of observing and learning it. I've heard about it a lot, but the first time I actually got to see it was down at the Meadowlark Botanic Gardens in Vienna. That's where this picture is taken. And this picture is not even come close to doing it justice. If you could see it in real light, this tree was like, it was glowing. I was standing probably close to 100 yards away from it. And from a distance, I see this tree that's just glowing, this orangey red, fiery color that's down there. And it caught my attention to where it went down and found Chinese pistache. Clearly not a native tree, but like I said, it's been more popular, I'm going to say down south where they've been planting a long time, because of its extreme heat and drought tolerance. It has been promoted and growing, and we're seeing more people planted up here. So we planted a couple of them in our parking lot just last year here at our Fair Oaks store. And so now I'm going to get a chance to watch this up close and see how it performs over the years. But it might be one to investigate and look at if you look for a super durable, heat and drought tolerant tree. I should double check on the size on this. I think we're looking at about like 30, 40 feet tall and wide, but that's kind of a guess. All right, we're going to go look at a couple of shrubs and then a couple small trees, and then we're going to take whatever questions you might have. Started out late, so I feel like I'm talking too much and too fast. But here we go. The oak leaf hydrangea, 100% plant. I think quite honestly, just every garden should have it. I'm always looking for four-season plants. And so I have here a plant that gives us these gorgeous blooms for us, usually in May. This leaf, it gets the name oak leaf hydrangea because you can see the texture of that leaf, which again gives us this very textured, coarse leaf through the summertime. The fall coloration is outstanding. And then they'll even have peeling, exfoliating bark as they mature, added to the winter interests in there. So these are one of those four-season plants that I think we really want to have in our garden. And there's a huge selection of varieties that are out there, some that stay very small. And I have a variety called Munchkin. It's been in the ground for probably getting close to 10 years now, and it's still at about a 4 foot by 4 foot size, staying very compact. And you can have others like, can't remember the full name, like Snow Queen, I think it is, and get quite large, like 12 feet tall and wide. Single flower, double flowers. You can find a place to have an oak leaf hydrangea, and it's one that you really might want to have. And don't overlook it for this nice burgundy fall color that it adds to the landscape. Any of you have been watching me talk or anything over the years know that pretty much I love everything and anything that's in the hazel family. And I do that really because again that they're just four season plants. And so this is Fothergilla, Fothergilla gardeniae, which is I think it's native to the southeastern U.S. I know it's through Georgia and I think up into the Carolinas. Doesn't quite reach Virginia, but a near native, as I call her, a close neighbor. And again, four seasons of interest. So in the spring, you get these really cool bottle brush looking flowers that have a nice fragrance to them. They don't form eight petals. It's just these staminate flowers that push out and have this cool appearance. And like I said, it's actually you might have to get within a few feet of it, but you'll get a nice sweet fragrance if you get up close when they're at the right bloom. And then they do have again just sort of a nice compact growth habit during the summertime, green, almost a blue-green color in the foliage, but then they will light up for us in the fall. This is a variety, it's called Suzanne, which is again, it's developed, I think, by Dr. Durr down in Georgia, particularly for landscape garden use because it stays a little smaller, more compact. This is again from my own garden again, and this is all in the front yard of a townhouse, so I can only grow the small compact stuff. Been in the ground for probably 3, 4 years, and it's still at about 3 feet tall and no more than 2 feet wide. So, and we have other varieties too. I mean, it's what if you again if you have the space, well, everybody has space, we can find a Fothergilla that will fit within your landscape. I think some of this we just have to get a little beyond this fixation we have with evergreens. One thing you notice is I don't have a lot of foundational type evergreens because I love the seasons and I love fall and I don't want a stagnant landscape. I want to enjoy and see all this happen. But again, everybody gets to create their own garden as they wish, not making judgments. But again, the witch hazel, uh, phenomenal. This is a hybrid with our Chinese witch hazel. It's not the native one. Our native ones, they might even be flowering about now. I haven't looked into that, but I think they're more like a November time period on the blooming. But these will flower for us in February. Again, nice foliage and nice form as we go through the summer months, but then the fall is really the peak season for these. And that's again where I try to have all four seasons of interest in there. So again, being a small property, I rather than a Bradford pear had originally been planted here. When that Bradford pear came out, I'm taking a witch hazel, which is really more of a large shrub, but I'm patient and little by little over the years, I'm training it into a small tree form. Right behind it, I just point out Amsonia, Amsonia hubrecti, which is again native to the southwestern part of the United States, very heat and drought tolerant, durable, basically indestructible perennial. It has this nice feathery fern-like foliage during the growing season, and they get quite large. I have to prune mine back at least once. I think I'm gonna have to start pruning them back twice to keep it in bounds during growing season. But then this brilliant yellow coloration that comes out and then goes to a bright orange before it sheds off for the winter time. So that's something. So we're at this point where we're starting to really see these seasons progress, and that's sort of been my theme for the day. Just looking through there, and to just enjoy the process, enjoy the ride along the way. And while we have all this late summer and fall color, we're moving towards winter. Winter is just to me, it's a season of quiescence, it's a season of rest, or dormancy that's in there. So this doesn't mean that our gardening season necessarily comes to an end. It just means that the plants are taking a rest for the winter time. So there's some always get questions or ideas about how we're going to manage those plants in the wintertime. So this is a commercial landscape, or sometimes what I call a clean landscape. In this situation, after all the growth is done, all the foliage is dropped off, the maintenance crews have gone in there. They've trimmed back the grasses that are here. They've kind of cleaned out the fallen leaves, mulched the beds, and put this garden to bed in a very clean fashion. It's there. Uh, what we're trying to be encouraged to do, and with good reason, a more ecological approach to gardening is let's leave that foliage behind. Let's leave those fallen leaves. Let's allow the stems to stay there. They will add a beauty of their own that you can see here, like the frost-colored seed pods on the sedum. But this also provides a habitat, an overwintering environment for insects and wildlife. They will bury themselves. So this is the Amsonia that you see here. That's a little tube-like, very small straw-like structure, and the little solitary bees tunnel down in there. They lay their eggs, and then the pupa develop in there, and that's where they spend their winter months in hibernation, having debris that's on the ground, like we see here with some of the annuals or perennials are left in there. Again, that provides shelter for overwintering butterflies and moths and everything from lightning bugs on. So the other insects and the other creatures that live in this garden need that shelter. It's with us. So if it works for you, if it works within your environment surroundings, let's just maybe try leaving that alone and leave that a place for everybody to have a place to rest through the winter time. And then we can delay and maybe do our cleanup later in spring when our temperatures are staying pretty well above 50, or the first signs of growth, and then even then be a little stingy with the green up. So that's it. I think that's my last slide exactly. And I appreciate you guys sticking with me through all that. And now we'll just open up and see if we have any questions or ideas that you want to share.
All right, I will get started reading questions. Just a reminder, everybody, please feel free to send your questions in now, and we'll get through as many as we can. We'll go until 3 o'clock. All right, first question. There are varieties of Camellia japonica that start blooming in the fall, like early wonder. Can you give us any examples of some long season blooming camellias? Okay, so it sounds like they're looking for the fall blooming camellias. What do you have any specific recommendations for those?
So I think a lot of this just kind of depends on colors that you like. So any of them where you saw that X in there, like, I think I had Winter Star or Snow Flurry, that X means it's a hybrid and probably came when that series out of National Arboretum. So they had ones like Winter Star, Winter Rose, Snow Flurry. So what those are doing is those names are kind of implying to you that has both the cold hardiness and it will be a fall bloomer. Now, one of the most popular ones, and I would give it some real serious thought, is a variety called Yuletide. It's it's red. I mean, it's really the closest to a true red. You have to see it. It's just a very beautiful color of red, simple flower form. And again, that name kind of has connotations where it's connects with Christmas season a little bit. So again, I don't know if they'll be flowering for you at Christmas, but they'll hit that pretty close to it. Uh, so boy, there's so many to choose from. They're all good. They're all reliable. One thing I'll mention is that camellias do better where they get a little bit of protection from cold, drying wind. So where you can put it in a sheltered environment up against a fence or a house or other plants to buffer it, that reduces that risk of winter injury on it. But they're all nice, and we got a huge collection of them.
Okay. Next question. My Encore azaleas here only open and bloom once in spring. What am I doing wrong? They never bloom over and over again.
So they did say it had encore, correct?
Yes.
So a couple things I would say about that. One is be a little careful, I'm going to say, on your pruning, because what will happen is, let's say they flower in April, uh, and then they set their flower buds by late July or August. So if you're going to prune them, we want to prune them immediately after flowering. So like May would be a good season to prune it. If they are being pruned or deer are browsing or anything that's injuring them during that, from July 4 onwards, that would definitely take flower buds away from you. The other is the Encore azaleas. They like more sun than some of the other azaleas do. So it's not one that's really ideal for deep shade. You get better flowering if you can get a little bit of sunlight on them. Beyond that, they're they've been pretty reliable for us as far as flowering. So maybe make sure you get a little bit of sunlight on them, be a little thoughtful when you're pruning. You could also fertilize them, but that was something that I would do again, sort of in May after they're flowering.
Gotcha. Okay. Next question. This is about watering. When in winter do you stop watering, if ever?
So what we really want you to do is kind of make sure that your plants are well watered going into winter. When we use this word, before the ground freezes. Uh, so we're going to be watering if we're not getting rain, like we've got ample rainfall just the last week or so. But you know what? We're still what we would call abnormally dry. I was checking the drought maps just yesterday. So we want to make sure that they're getting water throughout like October into November. By the time we get to December, hopefully everything's pretty well watered. If during that December, January, February time period, we expect to get moisture, but plants that are vulnerable, like new plants or something, you may need to keep an eye out, wait for a day when it's going to be above 40 degrees so that the ground is not rock hard and stuff, and actually go out and do a little hand watering. But that's going to be really on vulnerable plants.
Okay. All righty. Our next question is about hydrangea. Um, do I cut my hydrangea in fall? I've heard I should just leave it alone. So I asked them what they thought it was and then realized they said they use lime to get it to turn purple. So I think that means it's a macrophylla. So do they cut that back?
Right. So because the climbing hydrangea question is easy.
Yes.
Climbing hydrangea already has flower buds on it. So we really don't want to do any pruning on that or do anything to your climbing hydrangea until
Okay.
after it flowers next spring.
Okay.
Now, the macrophylla ones, the ones that have the pink and the blue flowers on them, they're tricky. They're fussy plants and the pruning on is particularly tricky. But the easier short answer I'll say is just for now, leave them alone. Um, Next spring around March, when you start to see those buds swell, at that time, it's easy to go in. And if you have dead branches, I'll thin out the dead branches. Uh, you can do a little bit of shaping, just tiny bit of shaping and deadheading, sort of doing a minimal amount of pruning because the branches that survive through the winter are the ones that are going to produce flowers for you in the spring and summer. So keep pruning at a minimum. And if you are going to prune them, just thin them out a little bit so you don't interfere too much with the flower. I also heard mention about the color. If you want to bring out more of the blue coloration in it, we're going to suggest using aluminum sulfate for that. And if you want to bring out the pink coloration, you'll apply lime. Those products can really be applied at any time of year if you're just trying to change the color.
Gotcha. Okay. That's always so interesting to me that the color changes. Um, all right, next question. How much or how often should mums be watered?
Uh, so if they're just mums and they're in a flower pot on your porch or something, just as kind of a fall decoration, you need to be checking on them every single day because right now the weather we've had this week where it's bright, it's sunny, low humidity, they can easily dry out in a day. So you would check those daily. If they're in the ground and they're well established, perennials are coming back from the previous year, uh, I'm going to say roughly once a week. Again, that's going to vary a little bit on the conditions. I was out watering mine last night. I know how crazy this is, but we had all that rain. My garden, at least parts of my garden, are still very dry. Again, like I said, our region is still abnormally dry if you look on the larger area. And so you might just check your moisture. And just because we had the rain, don't assume that they have adequate moisture. Otherwise, I'm going to say make sure you check on them at least once a week.
Okay. All right, we've got a lot of questions about camellias here. We'll try and get to all of them. The first one, is it a good season to transplant or move an unhappy camellia? This camellia is blooming less and less each year. Um, if they should transplant it now, should they fertilize? Basically, do you have any tips on transplanting camellias?
So I'm going to say a qualified yes, because camellias are vulnerable a little bit to cold damage and winter desiccation. So you can do it now, really, literally right now or next month, but understand that it's now a new plant. When you move it, you're cutting and severing roots. It's got a smaller root system. It is vulnerable to cold damage and drying out. So you'd want to put it in a sheltered location where it doesn't get the full onslaught of winter. And you must be prepared to water during dry spells. Our weather is so crazy right now. Like we had a really mild, wet winter last year, and I'd said, "Oh, no problem. Your camellia would have thrived." The winter before that, we had basically a winter drought, no snow, no rain, no sleet, and your camellia would have died. So we just have to just make sure we take ownership of the watering. But they transplant really well. I wouldn't hesitate. It's not going to do well that's there. If you really want kind of I would say no risk. Maybe you wait and do it in sort of like a February, March time period. But it's just judgment call. Mixing a little starter fertilizer in there is good, not required. Mostly they want like a moist, well-drained soil, add a lot of organic matter compost to the clay soil, loosen it up, watch watering, and you'll be good. They're very actually easy, reliable plants.
Okay. All right. I'm going to keep working on these camellia questions, y'all, since we have so many of them. We have like three or four. So we'll move. The most
Um,
of them I think are quick. Can you talk about how much sunlight camellias generally need, and are there any that particularly do well in more shade?
so, like a lot of plants, camellias will go from full sun to full shade. Their happy place is kind of right in between. They are more sun tolerant, I think, than people are led on to believe. I think where they do their best and get good flowering, I really like them to get at least 2 or 3 hours of direct sun on them at some point in the day to get good flowering on. When you put them in the deep shade, they'll live and they'll grow, but sometimes they get spindly. Then I was just thinking, that snow flurry camellia I showed you, that is under full blooms. That is growing under the canopy of a mature red maple. So it's not getting any direct sun, but it gets very bright indirect light, a lot of filtered light coming through there. So it's forgiving. Its best place is somewhere in between.
Okay. Uh, Last specific camellia question. Are they deer resistant?
No, they are not. I looked into this quite a bit because in my previous garden and home, I planted 5 camellias right outside my kitchen window. So I'd be hit with a big mass of these camellias in the fall. And one morning I wake up and I can't see anything. It's gone. It's empty, nothingness. It's to the point where I start questioning if I had actually planted them or dreamt that I plant them. But I go out and the deer had come through and period one night stripped every leaf and every single bud off of it. Now I see them listed on some deer resistant plant lists. So I'm kind of going to say it may not be their first thing on their menu, but I have enough personal experience and I've had enough experience with customers to say it will be the second thing on their menu.
Okay, that's good to know. Um, all right, next question. Okay, this person has a camellia and a hydrangea. It's in an area that gets about 6 hours of sun. They would like to add another flowering shrub. Um, do you have any, this could be a million suggestions, I'm sure, but do you have any suggestions perhaps for shrubs that are good at this time of year for fall color or blooms or anything that you'd add to add a little more?
I would tell you, and I'm saying it's come to mind because I put them in my slides here, but again, take a look at Fothergilla, or maybe even the witch hazel, which is a larger shrub. But if you want something that's kind of small with spectacular fall color, Fothergilla. Sometimes they're a little bit slow to get started, a little slow growing, but interesting flowers, really nice fall coloration that's in there. Uh, Another one that I would look at, because I just don't see people planting it, it's called Echianthus. I don't know its common name, but Echianthus, it's an Asian plant. It gets little bell-shaped flowers, kind of like a blueberry does, but really amazing, brilliant fall coloration in there. And while I mentioned, I'm talking about, hey, maybe even want to work some blueberries in there, you can get brilliant fall coloration and get some fruit out of them.
Okay, okay. Next question. Do you have any preference between Encore and Bloomathon azaleas?
No, I don't. I can't really tell the difference between them. And kind of full disclosure, I don't really like either of them. But that's
Yeah, I know you like the ones that bloom all at once.
right. But this is personal preference. I don't mean anything at all about them. One of the nice things with the Bloomathon and the Encores said they do better if you're in a sunny environment than some of our other azaleas. So they might um, do there. But no, I would just base it on the flower colors and what appeals most to you. They're
Gotcha. Okay.
almost.
All right. I have a Sweet Bay Magnolia. I've only had it for 1 year. It's currently in a pot. It lost all of its leaves last year. Do I have to worry about desiccation of that Sweet Bay?
No, Sweet Bay Magnolia, it's our native magnolia. It gets sometimes called a semi-evergreen, but they typically shed all of their leaves. Again, the way our weather is changing, of maybe maybe further south or we get mild winters, it may hold on to a few, but I pretty much expect them to shed all the leaves. So that's not unusual. And as far as winter desiccation, plants that shed their leaves, one of the reasons they do that is so that they can kind of don't have to sustain them. They're not actively transpiring, so they're not. We're less concerned about them, or there's much lower risk of them drying out in the wintertime. So it is a plant that likes moist area, but it's a good sturdy plant. Plant it. Just make sure it's well watered before winter comes, and you should be pretty good shape on that.
Okay. Okay. Next question. Is it better to plant mums in the ground? If so, do they need full sun? Do you have any tips?
Was that planting bulbs?
Mums.
Oh, mums?
Yeah.
So as long as they get at least 4 hours of full sun, anywhere from 4 hours of full sun up to all days full sun, you'll be successful with them.
Okay.
They're
Good to
really
know.
simple plants. They don't require a lot of fuss or care. You do oftentimes prune them back. So what'll happen is like if the mums start growing, they'll grow up really big and leggy and will actually flower for you in July. Um, so what a lot of growers do, what I do, and I would recommend that you do, is when they grow up, when they start getting leggy, sometime around June, I'll cut them back. Like the ones you saw, those Sheffield pinks, they're growing up. They're about this tall in June. I cut them down to like this tall, and then they flush back out, bushy or fuller. That's how you start getting this kind of effect.
Okay. Okay. This is our last question. Does Amsonia require fertilizer, and what kind would you recommend if it does?
No, Amsonia, it naturally grows and like Southwest is accustomed to low fertility, sunny conditions, heat and drought tolerant, no pest issues ever. Um, it's, I use this word exaggerating a little bit. It's about as close to an indestructible plant as you're going to find. Now, all plants, again, you have to water to get them established, but once established, that thing is rock solid. You would maybe want to fertilize it if you're trying to promote growth on it. The plant doesn't really require that. But if you had a small one and I wanted to push more growth on it, I might fertilize it in the spring.
Okay. All right. Well, that's our last question. Thank you guys so much. I know we got off to a little bit of a slow start, so thanks for sticking with us while they got the internet working. David, do you want to wrap up with anything in particular?
No, good. Thanks for sticking with me. I feel like we covered a lot of ground, even though we lost a few minutes, packed it all in here. And I'll be back on in a couple of weeks. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'll come up with something between now and
We'll
then.
see what the weather brings. All right. Well, thank you so much, David, everybody. Thanks as always for joining. Have a great afternoon.
All right. Take care, everybody.